Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Sunshine Coast Regional District regular board meeting of Thursday, January 14th, 2021. The calendar has changed over and we are in our first board meeting of the new year. And the year that was 2020 has finally ended. I would like to acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is located on the traditional territories of the Sechelt and the Squamish First Nations, and we're very grateful to be here. We have an amended agenda in front of us today. For those that are listening within the audience, it is within your, the links are all located at scrd.ca. You can see the amended agenda there. I'm first going to look for a motion to adopt this amended agenda, please. So moved Director Seegers, seconded Director McMahon. Are there any additions, changes, amendments to the already amended agenda? Seeing none, I will call the question. Oh, sorry, Director McMahon.
Totally sorry. I had one item of new business, which is application for Provincial Road Safety Strategy Committee.
Okay, so under new business.
Thank you.
Okay, any other amendment? Anything else to add to this amended agenda? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of the amended agenda with the addition of the item of new business? Thank you, motion carries. We have two sets of minutes in front of us, Annex A and Annex B, pages. We have the regular board meeting minutes of December 10th and the special emergency board meeting minutes of December 31st. I'm going to ask first for a motion to receive these minutes, please. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Are there any errors, omissions, additions, changes that need to be done to these minutes? Okay, we received, it takes a moment to get back into the swing of things. There's no changes to be done, so and we've received them. I'm gonna ask for a motion to adopt these minutes, please. Thank you, seconded. All those in favor? Thank you, motion carries. Are there any business arising from the minutes or unfinished business? I will note that there was that GM Rosenboom did give us an update on the slide earlier today when we were in the infrastructure services meeting. I don't know if you wanted to further comment on that, GM Rosenboom, or but we have the update that was given earlier today. If
I can briefly summarize it in terms of that work are going to commence imminently, hopefully tomorrow, and it will take about 1.5 to 2 weeks for the works to be completed. And in the meantime, there's been some erosion of the area, but due to the measures taken by staff to move the water away from the area, the erosion has been limited. So fingers crossed that everything goes well in the upcoming 2 weeks.
Okay, great. And thank you so much for the work that's being done, as well as for the communication that is coming from our communications department as well. Very appreciative of that. So next up, I'm going to ask for a motion to receive all reports because our delegation has their report, as well as there's an additional staff report. So we'll just receive all the reports now, please. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Motion carries. And then I'm going to tag it over to our delegation. But first, to introduce our delegation, I'm going to go to CAO McKinley, and you can start.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to, because I might forget at the end, or in case there's not time, I wanted to acknowledge and really thank Patricia and Amanda and Silas for the amazing work that they've put in on the remuneration review and the recommendations. You never know how these things are going to go, and they put in a tremendous amount of time It ended up being a lot of fun. It was fun working with them. They did an amazing amount of research. They put a tremendous amount of thought into their recommendations. It was a really enjoyable process, and I wanted to recognize them, and I wanted to recognize Tracy as well, Tracy Hinks, for the outstanding support that she provided throughout this. I'm looking forward to the presentation, and I just wanted to make sure I had a chance to say thank you so much to all of you before we wrap up. So thank you.
Thank you, CAO McKinley, and I'll echo the pre-thanks before we go into the report, just to make sure that we don't forget at the end. But I will pass it over. Patricia, I see you've unmuted yourself. Did you want to start and introduce the team, or Silas or Amanda? Which one of you would like to? Which one of you would like to start, introduce the team, and go right into everything?
I think what we decided we would all introduce ourselves and give you a little background on each other. And then we do have a slide presentation too, so I'm not sure if IT is going to turn the control over. I'll run it if IT can turn over the control to me so I can run the slide presentation.
I believe you should be able to, through share screen, should be able to work, and but we will be gentle.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Right. Well, first of all, I thank you very much for your kind comments. This, as the Dean said, this has been a really fun team to work with. We all turned out to be quite data junkies, so we dove in quite deeply on gathering information and research. So it ended up being a bigger project than we even thought it would be, but we learned a lot, and we're quite pleased with the results and hope that you will too. So a little bit about me. I have a long career in HR, spanning large companies and startup companies, industries from newspaper business, forestry, large consulting companies, interactive entertainment, etc. I'm aging myself quite well by doing all this. My last corporate role was the Vice President of Human Resources with the Walt Disney Company in Los Angeles, where I was responsible for game development studios globally. So I spent a lot of time on the road in other countries. When I returned back to Canada, I started my own consulting business, which I've had now for over 10 years. I have a broad range of clients across many industries, from small family-owned businesses to well-known nonprofits, leading architecture companies, construction companies, and biotechnology companies. My focus is primarily on advising boards, CEOs, leadership teams, and heads of HR on strategy, talent development, leadership development. And in addition to that, I'm also a certified compensation professional and get called upon quite a bit to develop compensation plans that support business strategies, which is what brought me to volunteering for this role. My first visit to the Sunshine Coast was as a 10-year-old attending Camp Olive. I won't tell you how long ago that was, but this is not a place that is easily forgotten. So here we are, just a few years later, where my husband and I reside with our 2 dogs in Roberts Creek. And that's me. And
okay, I'll take it from there, Patricia. My name is Amanda List, and I too had a wonderful time with this committee. It has been a learning experience. It's been a lot of laughs. It's been very good, and we're very pleased that it all came together. And we're pleased to be here today with you. I have lived on the Sunshine Coast for the past 19 years and absolutely love it. I had come here several times on vacation and just fell in love and knew that I had to eventually move here. I have my master's in leadership, and my I've held various roles in human resources, primarily in government and healthcare settings, I sort of was a generalist, so I kind of went everywhere from soup to nuts: compensation, recruitment, labor relations, and then ended up doing more around leadership development and working with teams and that sort of thing in the last few years that I was working. And now I'm happy to say that I'm retired. And so I had some time. So when I saw this come up, I thought this would be a great way to give back to the community. So that's how I got here. Silas, did you want to? You got to unmute.
Silas, you're still
Silas?
muted.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, okay, so I think I think everyone on the call knows me, so I don't need to be too detailed. I haven't retired here. I was born and raised here, though, and I spent 13 years as an elected official, including 2 years as a regional director and 2 years as an alternate on the Sunshine Coast Regional District. I've got a master's degree in public administration, and part of my time in elected office, I spent 5 years as the director and vice chair of the Public Schools Employers Association. So that immersed me very deeply in human resources and compensation, and I've always, as a school trustee, a counselor, and a regional director, I always had that kind of eye and perspective on considering compensation while I was serving, and so this was a natural fit for me to really get engaged with this, and I had tremendous learning and experience working with Patricia and Amanda, and just incredible staff support from Tracy and Dean too. They deserve a lot of credit for supporting us. Thanks.
So if we could share the PowerPoint presentation, I have to start.
I will do that. You should all see that now.
Yep. So we've done this piece, so we can go to the second slide.
Here we go.
Okay, so at our first meeting, we got together and Tracy presented us with a very large binder full of resource documents, which we have to thank Tracy for, because the manual and the subsequent documents that were given to us have been invaluable in the work that we've done. We started by reviewing the terms of reference and the policies and procedures, and the Union of BC Municipalities Council and Board remuneration document, and formed our objectives, these 3 objectives, based on the mandate that was given to us. Next slide, please. Sorry. Okay, so as it would have been easy to go off down all kinds of rabbit holes with the project, because we soon found out how complex it was, and how easy it would be to get off on the wrong tangent. We felt it was really important during the first couple of meetings to get a clear picture of the scope of work. And so this is these 5 points indicate the scope of the work that we took on. Next slide, please. As we talked about the current situation, it became really clear to us that we were touching, anything we talked about seemed to grow legs and go from one thing to another. And so one thing was impacted by so many other things. So we talked, and a few of those things kept coming up. And at that point, we decided to make these our guiding principles, which, as we worked through the project, we continually went back to and used to test our findings and our recommendations. So these were really important to us. Next slide, please. So with those three documents, our objectives and our guiding principles and so forth, we developed our work plan and set about distributing the tasks for each other to work on, so that we weren't, when we went away, we weren't all doing the same kind of thing. So we were trying to make the best use of our time. The work plan included reviewing other regional districts in the province, gathering information from key stakeholders regarding the current situation and where they would like to see things go in the future, identifying and analyzing alternatives, and developing and costing our recommendations. Each week we met to review and discuss the work we had completed in the previous week and allocate assignments for the coming week. These weekly meetings really worked well as a touchstone to share information and to ensure that we continue to follow that work plan. Next slide, please. So, findings. The following two slides outline our findings. Once all of the research and analysis was completed, these findings formed the basis for our recommendations, which Patricia is going to talk about. So it was clear that meetings played a key role in the overall compensation, with the message being that meeting attendance equals higher compensation. The survey from the directors indicated that not only were the respondents dissatisfied with the current plan, the majority felt that the current plan did not support the regional district's mission statement, and it inhibited them from doing their best work. So that was very interesting information for us. Also, meeting attendance showed up in the top 4 items as being extremely important from that survey. Next slide, please. An analysis, a 6-year review of the SOFI reports showed us that the payment structure was consistently followed. However, there were significant inconsistencies regarding individual director compensation, and that was largely due to attendance at meetings and conferences. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find a suitable comparison in the regional districts in BC, and that's because there's so many variables at play, the size, the location, the population, the budget, etc. So it's difficult to kind of find that good comparator. We did find consistency in the province in the use of the Consumer Price Index as a tool for annual cost of living increases. So we've worked that into our recommendations. And we heavily relied on the UBCM Council and Board Remuneration Guide for assistance, particularly with best practices, and to be sure that the recommended remuneration plan was both fair and defensible. So on that note, I would like to turn it over to Patricia York to go into our recommendations and the supporting data.
Okay, so we came up with, looking at all this information, we concluded that the role of each board position should be clearly defined and understood. We found that that was not, it was through the survey itself, we found that people were not exactly clear on all the elements of the role necessarily, but that there was not a clearly written job description as well. So we felt that was really important, and particularly this was important for Amanda and I, because from a compensation perspective, the first thing you look for when you're trying to develop a compensation system is what are the roles and responsibilities of each role. So clearly define that. So we felt that was really important that that happened. We thought also, looking into how some of the other governance issues across the various other regional districts, and we read a lot of reports and things about committee and structure and attendance, would possibly benefit from being streamlined to allow members more time to focus on priorities. So looking at how that could be streamlined, and maybe there could be less meetings. And reporting would, if reporting was easier, then it would be easier for the staff time and resources, and not taking up not quite so much time on staff, figuring out who attended what meeting, how long were they there, etc. To simplify that, to allow people more time to focus on their roles and responsibilities rather than these administrative housekeeping things. We felt strongly that the new plan should be designed to try and support all three of these issues. So on the next slide, what we're going to talk about is our recommendations, which are in the materials that you'd received earlier, but we wanted to highlight some of these things. So we recommended that the board really adopt the policy, write the roles and the roles and responsibilities, and a code of ethics. And we've included quite a few samples. We did quite a bit of research on what other areas are doing to provide the board with a resource of different samples for consideration. Adopt the base rates for the electoral area and municipal directors that includes everything. And I'll walk through our thought process on that, of why we came to that conclusion, and that continue on what you're doing already with the consumer price index, annual increases. That makes really good sense, and it's in line with what other areas are also doing. Consider piloting maybe a new model that is more aligned with what other boards are doing too, and that's in Appendix D of the broader report. That all directors definitely, declare your expenses and get reimbursed for them. We noticed that that's not necessarily happening, but we thought it was important enough to put it in there that all expenses should be declared. We're recommending that reducing the number of conferences to a maximum of 3. So the UBCSM, the AVICC, and then one other conference, and eliminating conferences for alternate directors. Again, these are for your consideration. And that this do an independent review of the remuneration plan every 4 years. And it doesn't need to be as in-depth as what we've done now that there is some framework and that can be built upon over the next time this is done. But I think it should be a little bit easier, but it is a good practice to review your plans every few years. And we did this so it would be in line with prior to election years. So what does this mean? This should say number 2, the board. We're looking now is how do we get to our base rate development? How do we do that? We looked at many models, as we talked about, and how we came up with something. And there was absolutely, as Amanda's already said, there's no apples to apples comparison. There's so many different factors in different areas. But there are conclusions in some of the other areas that have also come to that try to make it simple, make it easier, make it so it's less time thinking about that and just being able to think about the work instead. So if you have the full reports with you, we talk about that on page 15 of the report of how we got to it. However, what we did was we looked at the SOFRI reports and what was the average remuneration paid to directors. These are non-election years only. And what was the average that was paid to them over the course of these particular years? So the average came out to $32,518, which we then rounded up to $33,000. Just keeping it nice and simple from a compensation perspective. We really like to work with round numbers. And so that's what we decided to do on that one. The proposed structure then became we took the base rate of $33,000 and then we included the CPI increase of 1.1%. And that brought us to $33,363. Then we looked at how are we going to develop then from there? What is the rate for a municipal director? What is the rate for what is the chair supplement? What is the vice chair supplement? And then the alternate directors, what should that look like? So on that, we decided that remember now, this rate includes meeting attendance, annual stipends, standing committee chairs stipends, per committee meetings chaired, any day rates for conferences, and any other stipends. So it's all rolled up into one. We then looked at the municipal area stipend and we multiplied the electoral areas up by 70%. So we considered it was about 70% of the electoral area stipend, simply because we felt that the workload is significantly different than what it would be for the electoral area. So that seemed like a reasonable number and was close in line with what was happening anyway. And then we looked at the chair supplement, and we did that for the electoral area director. We multiplied that by 70%. And then for the vice chair supplement, we multiplied that by 9%, which comes in slightly higher than it already is. So the numbers are slightly higher, but not significantly. For the alternate director, we came up with a day rate of $1,600, and then we used their single current meeting rate of $135, added to their current day rate for attending any meetings of $119 to come up with a new daily rate of $255. So the rates are. There's a clear formula in behind them is what we're trying to say in here, and that we went through quite a detailed thought process and to come up with them. So what does that look like then from a cost impact perspective? So looking at the number of electoral directors, of us being 5 of them, municipal directors 4, there's 1 chair supplement, there's 1 vice chair supplement, there's 9 alternates. The number for the alternates is increased to $2,110 for costing only, because we're assuming that they're attending 2 meetings per year. Otherwise, the rate would be just the $1,600 plus the $255, which gives us a grand total of $305,000. So what we wanted to do then is take a look at, well, how does this compare to what has been happening in previous years? So we looked at the total remuneration on the SOFA reports, and this is the total now. This is all directors and alternates, et cetera, and the other supplements. And looking over again in non-election years, and we saw in 2019, it was $298,512. With our proposal, it would increase to $305,079 for about a $6,500 change, or a 2.2% increase. However, it's important to note that this increase includes the 1.1%. Now, you may be asking, why didn't we use 2020 numbers in here? Well, for one, we were only partway through the year, so we did not have the year-end numbers yet. And 2020 is an unusual year, shall we say, in that it would make it more difficult to be able to use those numbers. So we thought that 2019 was solid. It was more reflective of prior years, and it fit in better with the modeling. I know we've gone pretty quickly over this, and there's so much data in behind this, but we wanted to really highlight, if I go back into here, what our recommendations are, that we wanted to highlight that this is more than just recommending the remuneration part. It's also about the other pieces that we felt were very important to support it. And especially considering the model that we're recommending, that there is a complete total compensation number versus having to track meetings or overtime at meetings or other bits and pieces of it, that this would make it easier to administer, easier for, I think for, we talked about in the beginning, some of our, this one here in particular, that we felt it was important to promote good governance. These issues kept coming up over and over again as we went through all the data, attracting and retaining strong candidates. And we want to make sure that you're able to continue the slate of good candidates that we have, and clarifying the roles and recognizing that there is some higher statutory requirement for electoral area directors. So we went back in here and looked at the scope of the work, and this is in the document that we were provided of what the scope of the work. We did the checklist. Did we come up with an annual remuneration structure? Yes. Did we deal with stipends, supplements, and allowances? Yes. Did we allow for annual adjustment calculations? Yes. And then for benefits, we did look at them. Our benefits expert, Amanda, took a look at them. And there was really no need for any changes in the benefit plans because it's a very strong plan as it is. And so we felt there was really no need for us to make any recommendations there. And the option, of course, is always open to the board to consider for making any periodic adjustments that are necessary. So we felt that in our 52-page report, I believe it was, that we hope you've all had an opportunity to read, that we had met the requirements of this committee. And now I want to ask you if there's any questions. I know we went over it quickly, but as I said, there's a lot of detail in the final report of itself, and we just wanted to provide you with a summary and point you to the highlights.
Yeah, and I volunteered to facilitate the questions as my role in the presentation. I'll ask the first question though, because there was, I saw a look of confusion or two on one slide, and I think there's a slide that was talking about the alternate daily rate, and it says pay per meeting, which yes. I think is actually per day.
Correct.
So
correct.
Yeah, it was somebody's look of confusion tweaked me to that. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. So I see Donna's hand raised first.
Thanks. I was curious about how comparable regional districts were chosen, given that there is such a very wide variety of regional districts.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We were provided with a huge binder of data, and I think that Tracy and Dean provided for us, and other studies that the other regional districts have done. So what we ended up looking at is, as close as I said, it's more of an apples to oranges comparison, because there is no exact match. So in compensation, we call this is the art and science of compensation, and it is a bit of an art form in that then you get the science and you look at it and then you figure out what the art is around it. We looked at, we had so many reports to go into to look at. We looked at themes for what they were doing as well. So it was more around, well, what are the issues that they're facing? Are these issues the same ones that the Sunshine Coast is a regional district is facing? And it seemed to be that there was a number of them that pointed out the issue of when you're paying per meeting, it gets complicated, it's administratively onerous. There's no way of really predicting what the proper income is for a director, and they were looking for some stability around that. So that was some of the criteria that we used in there, looking at, knowing that it wasn't so much the numbers themselves that were important as that what is the underlying underpinnings for what made for good governance in their areas.
I'll just point out too that as was previously raised, this wasn't an exercise of kind of going through picking, which I've seen in other compensation reviews before, deciding about some comparable regional districts and then just figuring out the average of them all and assigning it. It was definitely doing a survey of all regional districts, and particularly looking at some that are more comparable in population and in region. But really, I mean, an interesting aspect of the SCRD is you can compare just the SCRD year to year by itself and go, okay, well, in 2013, directors tended to be paid this much because of the amount of meetings they had and the amount of conferences that were going on versus 2015 versus 2018. So really, we focused a lot on internally the variation, which is convenient because at least we're talking about the same regional district, same duties, and that's how we determine the ultimate numbers. Andreas?
Thank you, Silas, and yes, thank you for that great amount of work that you guys did on us. I guess one question would be if an electoral area director were incapacitated for a certain amount of time, and the alternate director would have to step in for, say, half a year, which has happened in the past, whether it's health reasons or whatever. How would that be, and what kind of contingencies would have to be put in place for that?
I think the board would have to, for that length of time. I mean, there's for a significant length of time, sometimes people have to consider whether they need to stay on in the role or not. Really, I think a lot of arguments can be made, but I think for a certain, there's definitely cases where people need to go on leave, and for unique circumstances, and unique circumstances need to be handled uniquely. I think I don't think we address that in the report. Like I said, I've been on the Sunshine Coast a long time. I'm aware of that happening once over the last couple decades that I've been watching the regional district. So it does happen, and it was handled in a unique way at that time, I believe. Mm-hmm. I think Director Toth was next.
Thank you, Silas. I voted against doing this work in the first place. Despite that, I will commend you guys for the work that you've done and the amount of effort you've put into researching this. I did have one question. Can you advance the slides one slide? I think it was on the next slide that I had a puzzled look come across my face. Yeah. So in here, you've got the 4 municipal directors and a multiplication at the same rate as the electoral. So I was just wanting to confirm that the total was correct, even if the rate was not correct.
I probably typed in the wrong number, it looks like. Did I do that? I did type in the number. It should be 23354. I can fix that. Sorry.
Okay, but the total itself was correct. It was just
the total itself is correct. Yeah, it should be the same as the chair supplement amount.
Okay. I didn't have any other questions based on your presentation. Thank you.
Good catch.
All right. And I see Director Hiltz and Director Beamish both put up their hands around the same time. Who wants to jump in?
First, can we maybe ask Patricia to just stop screen sharing just so we can see everyone, please? Thank you.
I've muted, so why did I go ahead then? It was just a question within the report, and it confused me when I was reading it, and when I look at it again now, I still do. And it's the table that's on page 8 of the report, page 23 of the agenda. I just feel it needs a little bit more language around it, because when I read it, I was looking and saying, well, geez, directors are getting $123,000 a year. When I read down that, and there's no kind of explanation, it just says our review of the current director remuneration expense cost is summarized in the following page. Base stipend is $38,000. If I didn't have some other numbers in my head, I might wonder, oh, so can directors get $38,000? They get $63,000 median pay. It just seemed to be it needs much more language around that table from myself, even though I understand it. If I was looking from the outside, I might go to the total and say directors get $123,000 a year. There's not a lot of explanation on that.
What page was that you were on?
Page 23 of the agenda, page 8 of the report.
It'd be nice if we got 123,000.
Well, I was thinking something wrong here.
Okay, this is the summary. This is the total amounts that were spent on total conferences spent was base stipend.
Yeah, I'm not sure what I'm not sure how it adds value either, certainly, but it just is yeah.
Yeah.
That's
this was for the electoral area directors only, and this is the total amounts that were on the report, the 2019 SOFI report.
Just need some more explanation then as the source.
Sure, understood.
I do have questions around expenses, but I'll wait until others have dealt with remuneration.
okay. Got Director Hiltz for the first round of questioning here.
Sure. I think Director McMahon was ahead of me, but if up to Donna, do you want to go ahead?
Everyone ask a first question, and then I'll get the second questions in another round.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the report. The one word that really comes out for me was on page 26, dissecting the role. I did when I was reading, it felt like I was reading an autopsy in some ways. So it was really interesting to see us turned inside out in some ways, which I've never seen done before. But my first question is about the recommendation number 6, and it was about eliminating the practice of paying alternate directors to attend conferences. And what was the rationale around that?
I don't know. Amanda, do you want? I know Amanda had some strong feelings about this one. I will say that just we didn't really address it so much in our presentation, but we did find, and certainly hearing some of the history from Tracy especially, that and reviewing, we spent a lot of time, like you said, dissecting the role. We also dissected how the remuneration structure has evolved over the years. And we must have looked at least a decade, I think more, of different years where different motions would come forward, adding little pieces every time. So that's what made it really challenging for us, in that there wasn't a strong kind of coherence to having one structure. It was always, there were all these little additions and maybe subtractions, and for conferences, for example, different conferences would be added every few years. And this one was, we just felt like this is something that seemed like a little bit of an anomaly, a little odd.
I can speak to it.
It must have just been added one year rather than kind of having a streamlined, coherent approach.
I can speak to it if you'd like, Silas, because
yeah,
it was that we saw, it just kind of red flagged us when we saw that alternates were going to conferences, because alternates our understanding of alternates is that they go in when the regular elected official cannot, and there's no real requirement to go to a conference. And particularly if there were other elected officials going to the conference. A couple of the cases, it was alternates from either Seashelt or Gibson's, which we then thought, well, why wouldn't Seashelt or Gibson's pay for them to go to conferences if they wanted them to go for a conference? So that was kind of, that was our question about that. And as Silas said, there was, I mean, we looked at it, there was an average of 18 days spent at conferences a year, which is a lot for anybody. And so that's where we came up with that whole recommendation around conferences, because we felt that it maybe just hadn't been looked at. It was maybe just something that kind of went through whenever anybody asked to go for a conference, and just needed a closer look.
And Patricia, do you have it? I forget if it was in the presentation, but do you have it on hand, like the overall percentage of it? It was quite eye-opening, the amount of the percentage of an average stipend that actually was compensating directors for attending conferences.
Yeah, that's the one we were talking about on page 8. Well, that was just for those 4 electoral districts.
I think it was 10% or something, but I think that would be
8% when you're looking at just the electoral area directors. It was 8%, just looking at those.
Yeah, so I think that would, in our view, as our full committee felt that would be a bit of a surprise to a lot of people in the public to know that almost 10% of compensation is derived from attending conferences. Okay, Director Seegers hasn't spoken yet, so I'll go straight to Director Seegers.
Perfect. I mean, I'll address that one. I mean, I'm in favor of the numbers you guys come up with. I'm totally okay with that. I guess what I'm looking at is, how do we get diversity on the board? And it would show up inside of the stipend for conferences. If somebody's working and needs to take time off work to go to a conference, they're actually giving up revenue to go to a conference for the regional district, but aren't actually being compensated for that. So I don't know how that plays in here. Also, you know, if we want younger people to come and be on the board, is this going to incentivize them to be here? Did you guys look at any of that kind of stuff when you were looking at putting the information together? Because currently you have to either be self-employed or retired. That's it.
We talked about this for multiple meetings, constantly. I just spoke a lot for the last question, so I'll see if Patricia or Amanda want to delve into this one.
This was a hot spot within our committee. Even we had very different views on this. And Amanda, we should probably talk about the daycare issue, because that came up a couple of times as well. And but you know, we came to there's so much more discussion, I think, that needs to happen on some of these issues as well, that in the time period that we have, we did not necessarily even agree ourselves, because I think it's a bit of a hot topic, and it's one that needs to be addressed, but it would take us even longer to be able to get where we got to, because it's such an important topic. So Amanda, do you want to say some thoughts about the daycare issue? Because I know you and I had very diverse thoughts on that one.
Yeah, we were talking about, because I guess it came up in that, you know, for younger people to be able to put themselves forward for these positions, that daycare was often an issue. And should we be looking at putting in something to pay for that? And I guess I was coming from the background that I have in healthcare. I know that once you start to put into a compensation plan those kinds of benefits for people that are not part of the union, excluded from the union gets onto that, and then it becomes an extremely costly kind of thing, because why do elected officials get paid for their daycare when workers don't get paid for their daycare? And it just goes on and on and on. And so I had some really strong, because I could just see where it would go. Right. In terms of the conferences, Darnelda, it's hard. And in terms of actually the whole issue of getting younger people in and that sort of thing, and people that aren't necessarily self-employed, it is difficult. I don't know. We don't have a magic answer for that. We, like Silas and Patricia said, we talked and talked and talked about it, but there isn't like a magic answer that's going to resolve this problem of getting younger people in.
And just to build on what Amanda is saying, because I just felt that the conversation that we had about this topic was so valuable, because we were able to bring to the table different points of views and things that need to be considered in a topic like this. So yes, my first response was, yes, let's take a look at daycare, see what that might look like. And people are asking for that. And then, in conversation, then I started thinking, well, she's right. This is a pretty big issue, and some of the ramifications could be bigger than we had intended. So it seemed like something that might be outside the purview of this committee and would need to be addressed in another way.
Yeah, I'll dive in here. On daycare, we did research on just as an example of, we're using this as an example of how much we considered about this concern of trying to attract working people and younger people, and found that a lot of local governments and governments of all level have talked about it. Very few have actually followed through. Maybe a couple in Alberta, but we couldn't find any in BC that had followed through on compensating daycare. And one would be the issues Amanda raised, and I think another issue that I came across when doing some research, is where to draw the line of what and how quickly opinions diverge when you start talking about drawing the line. Like, can someone's parents get compensated for childcare? Can the spouse get compensated? Does that count? So it's just it becomes such a can of worms. I think a lot of local governments who considered it backed off. More generally, there is wording in our report which we did find that we all agreed with, which is that in surveying other governments, other local governments, we couldn't find a correlation between compensation and attracting younger people by if you look at some of the regional districts that do have higher remuneration, do those boards have younger working people? No, it turned out they didn't. So there wasn't in that kind of fact-based way of looking at it, there was no evidence that kind of having policies that one might assume would attract younger working people to not have to have jobs don't necessarily work. There are a lot of reasons why and I guess considering it more, there are many reasons other than remuneration why these positions tend to attract and tend to be the public tends to support people who are often quite experienced and maybe do have more time to put into it, and it also connects to the amount of meetings that are had too, and we touch on that in some of our other recommendations, the governance piece. So those are some other points around that. And back to Director McMahon on there.
I'm going to let Director Toth go ahead of me.
Thank you. I was up till 2 o'clock in the morning reading this and writing comments, and I've got 1,000 words that are dedicated for discussion and debate amongst the directors, and I don't want to necessarily drag the committee into it. But one thing I do want to flag is that, tagging on to Director Seegers, if I was a rural director under the current system, I get paid to attend UBCM or AVICC at a daily rate. We don't at the municipal level. I think that getting paid a daily rate is a good thing. People who aren't retired, who still need to work to pay the bills, feed their families, pay their mortgage, need to take time off of work to attend conferences. UBCM this year, we had several members of council who just could not justify taking the time off of work, and they missed out on UBCM because of that. If a director has to use vacation pay in order to pay their mortgage while attending UBCM, the system fails. If a director is self-employed, needs to either hire staff to cover off being away or close their business to attend a conference, the system fails. Yeah. Not every director who ever sits at this table is going to be independently wealthy, retired, or works a job where they're granted several weeks of leave. I've spoken to a director in another jurisdiction who has to fight with his spouse every time a conference comes up because he's not paid to attend, and they have a farm to run. He's needed for work. It's not just a childcare issue.
Okay, so again, I'll go back to our philosophy, which was we tried and we considered that directors tend to go to UBCM. It tends to be, we looked at kind of a hierarchy of parts of the role and really strongly considered the full-on statutory, decision-making responsibilities in terms of our recommended model. But we also consider all the other things that directors do and have been compensated for years. And that's how we arrived at the average. To the daily rates that have gone to UBCM, AVICC, all the other conferences were actually part of the calculated average that came out here as a but now we're recommending that be a base rate rather than rather than for every single meeting being kept track of by your staff. So that's the difference. I think. I mean, it's still even though it's not a statutory expected part of the role, it's still something that we considered to be something that enough directors do that it's part of the base rate that we're recommending, that that compensation that has traditionally gone to directors be continue to go, but more as part of an annual base rate.
And I guess to tag on to that, just as a quick follow-up, is that if that's included in the base pay, that's one thing, but there's no disincentive to not go. Like, there's no penalty if you don't go. And maybe that's outside the scope of this, and that's a policy related thing. That's totally fine. But, it comes down to that. Well, yeah, I'm sort of getting paid to go, but at the same time, if I don't go, I'm still going to get the same paycheck I would if I were going.
I guess I will speak from my own experience, because that was my role on the committee too, in that over my years, people I served with got varying degrees of benefit out of going to conferences. Some people loved it, went every time. Others, it wasn't really their thing and felt it wasn't really their role. It is optional. So when it really comes down to it, it's something that we included in our average, but it's not something that I don't think we kind of put it on the top of our when we considered the statutory role and responsibility, which we spent a lot of time doing. It didn't come up like in the legislation, for example, describing what regional directors do in the community charter, in the Local Government Act. So that's a factor too. Was there another? Oh yeah, Director McMahon, do you want to ask now?
Sure. I just wanted to say, in reviewing the current compensation structure, I thought the committee showed commendable restraint in not using the word dog's breakfast. But I just wanted to point out that when I was looking at the total number for compensation that came to over 300,000, and it seemed much higher as a total in previous years, I was scratching my head a bit, and then I realized, of course, there's one more director. We were comparing to years where there were 8 directors and there's now 9 directors. So just, for the awareness of anybody who's watching this, it's again, apples and oranges a little bit.
Yeah, we went through that too, where the numbers weren't added up, and I think we even wondered why is Sechelt, I think somebody newer to the issue said, why is Sechelt sending 2 people? And then we went back in history and said, oh yeah, well, Sechelt went over 10,000 in 2018 and automatically got this, and that's why suddenly the overall number changed in 2018. So thanks for pointing that out.
Silas, I think Director Beamish had a question earlier around expenses. His hand was up and then he took it down again. Director Beamish?
I did. I think I satisfied myself that it's no longer a question. We actually used to have in this town of Gibson's policy that we would recognize childcare expenses for certain things. But I see, as we're talking now, I'm reading the policy and it's no longer there. And the reason being is because it was a barrier for people to attend a conference or attend something. It wasn't for just attending routine meetings. That was part of what you had. Your plan was when you started out. But for attending conferences or things like that, childcare was going to be a recognized cost. But it no longer is. But there's a category in there that basically talks about a counselor may make a request to council for special extraordinary expenses to be considered on a one-time basis, and that could well be covered in there, sort of thing. I can't because, but if you take that barrier away, I can participate. So it's no longer an issue.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. looks like we're off the compensation piece and starting to talk about expenses. So I wanted to weigh in here. You probably noticed that, well, you may not have noticed. I'm not sure. 2019, 2020, I haven't put any expenses in. After in 2019, I did the calculation about. I live 8 kilometers from the Field Road office, right? I'm really close. I would have had to do a stack of paperwork, like a huge stack of paperwork to claim $250. I said, no, I'm not doing that. So it's not worth my time to spend, a few days putting together documentation for $250. So I don't claim expenses unless it's, other than that. So, I mean, and I get where you're coming from in this, is that you want the community to know what the expenses are and that we are not subsidizing through our own pocket the expenses. I get that. If it's other than mileage, I would claim it. Mileage, I won't do it. And I'll be straight up front with that. I'm not going to do it because in my world, it's not worth the time. I can take that same time and make way more than that doing something else. So that's it. That's all I have to say about expenses.
Director Ties.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we're piecemealing our way through this report, but I was looking at page 31 and the roles and responsibilities of directors, and I when it goes to electoral area directors, there was one bullet saying, additionally, electoral area directors represent and lead local government in their areas in rural planning, parks and land use regulation, building regulation and inspection, et cetera, et cetera. But what I thought was really lacking was, you're also directing email traffic, you're responding to inquiries and concerns of the local population. And maybe that's included in that role, but I think, the bulk of my time is actually spent on, not doing planning matters, but to actually, answer questions or direct people in the right direction. So, I'm not sure if that's clearly outlined in that part, but that was just my comment.
Yep. Strongly considered, and sorry if you didn't pick it up in the way the English has been written out there, but that's definitely strongly a part of this report. And right going back to the those guiding principles. I think it's in those guiding principles that Amanda presented about the greater role of that electoral area directors need to be take on, which is really the municipal role plus the director role combined for the equivalent of that for municipal directors.
The other thing is that those role descriptions are just there for you to work with, and you can add things that are missing. I mean, we don't think that they're all encompassing. The main thing is to make a difference between what a municipal director does and what an electoral director does, and then to add on, the duties of the chair and the vice chair, so that it's helpful. It's helpful for anybody coming in to understand what their role is going to be. So those were put forward as drafts for you, really.
Director McMahon?
Sure. I figured that my time is about 50-50 between meetings directly associated with meetings of the board and constituency stuff. So obviously getting 4% of my pay for 50% of the work was not a great system in my opinion. I just wanted to address anecdotally in talking with people. I understand that the pay for meeting system was brought in as an attempt to incentivize attendance. at meetings. I have very mixed feelings about whether or not that's a successful strategy, and whether in fact attendance is the right measure, because just because you're there doesn't mean that you're doing anything or paying attention or have prepared for the meeting. I was wondering if you had discussed that, and also whether any regional districts have come at it from the opposite point of view, which is to penalize people who don't show up.
We discussed it extensively, especially at the beginning of our process. So I think maybe every committee member might want to chime in on this. But I'll start off by saying no to the last question. I think a big reason for that would be the administration again. I mean, the administration of this is just mind-boggling as it is, in keeping track of all the meetings everybody attends, tracking and times so the meeting goes over a certain limit and who's there for that, and to actually keep track of like penalties too, I think would be just beyond what any local government could even imagine doing. More generally, one point I've always thought about with the whole idea of incentivizing attendance is, if you really focus on that much, Director Seegers was talking about, well, and Director Toth too, about like, well, what about people who, we need to be accessible to everybody. What about people who are independently wealthy or have other jobs? I mean, if you make it an economic incentive to attend meetings, just as easily people could say, well, the $150 isn't worth my time today. I think I'll do my day job, right? Because that's worth more to me. So like personally, as someone who's done it, I found that it's a stronger message to say, this is the role over the entire term, over the entire year. This is what you get for the entire year. Do your job. And that's why the written responsibilities are so important too. That we come back to that throughout the report. Get these responsibilities down of what the job entails, which is attending meetings among so many other things, and then that's what you get paid for over a whole year, rather than picking it all out one by one, and then people can kind of decide, well, I'll do this, I won't do this, and I don't think that's in the public interest. Do Amanda or Patricia want to speak to this big topic?
I think you covered it off quite well, Silas. As you said, this was a long discussion amongst us of what really incentivized people and what disincentivized people. So the idea for having the one all-encompassing rate was you choose what to do with your time. And you choose, we hopeful as responsible directors that responsible directors attend meetings and they do the job of the role, which is why it's so important to have the job description. And that also answers the question about, attending conferences, that you choose to what you need to do with your time for the same rate, whether it's spending more time in your areas or you need to go to a conference. It's covered, it's in there. The directors are responsible for how they spend their time and do the job that is they've been elected to do.
That's a great point. Yeah, I was just thinking in my time again, when I was reflecting on directors who maybe didn't get a lot out of conferences, I wouldn't say overall, or counselors or trustees, I wouldn't say that overall those people contributed less to their role. They just focused their time on other things. Mm-hmm. I've lost track. I think Director Toth is next. Yeah.
Thank you, Silas. A comment, since it's on the same topic, and then a quick question regarding expenses. The majority of this board this term has had exceptional attendance, and past boards have had really good attendance as well, and participation levels vary. But it really can't be expected to always be the case. And much like a code of conduct, you hope for the best, but you've really got to plan for the worst. there is no mechanism for removing a rural director who maybe only shows up to a couple meetings every year. Not only is there no mechanism for removal, but you're actually rewarding that behavior versus a director who's fully read, has notes prepared, and is diligently attending and participating in every meeting. That's mostly just a comment for my fellow directors. My question is, with the expenses, you recommended a internet reimbursement on 1/3, 2/3. I'm just wondering why you went that route versus a flat rate. Internet plans range from $40 to $150 a month. As a municipal director, getting reimbursed 1/3 at $150 a month, I'm actually going to be getting more back than a rural director who might be only having a $40 a month internet plan.
I think that came into the recommendation pretty late in the game. We thought we should have some kind of recommendation there, and didn't deeply discuss what it should be. We really thought that more staff than the two individuals we had at the table should be involved in that. I believe there's precedent for that, though. I believe that 1/3 has been something that's happened in the past. So that's something we thought would make sense to put in there as at least a placeholder. I don't expect Amanda or Patricia to have anything more on this because we didn't spend a lot of time on that, to be honest. Director Beamish.
A couple of points. Just to speak to that last one, as a municipal councillor, I get 1/3 of my internet paid and 1/3 of my telephone paid. So that's what we get at the town office. On page 20 of the agenda, page 5 of the report, last paragraph, good governance. I'm just not comfortable the way it's characterized there in terms of suggesting that directors paid by the meeting and even length of the meeting, which creates an economic incentive to have more and longer meetings. I'm not sure how many of the people around the table are looking for more and longer meetings simply to get extra pay. One thing that is not recognized in here at all is the meeting preparation, the amount of time that is spent in advance of a meeting, preparing for a meeting, and even just acknowledging that as a significant time labor. I think that's important to do. And I don't know if it's possible to recharacterize that paragraph. Somebody reading that from the outside might have a view of that something odd is going on there, that they were actually patting ourselves and getting more and longer meetings. And
is it not there on the same page? About line 5.
Line 5 up the top.
In order to be compensated for everything other than the time directors spend in meetings, such as meeting preparation,
maybe
outreach, communications, research, etc.
Yeah, but it may be. It just doesn't. It didn't jump to me as being a significant part of the good governance process, which I think is part of that sort of thing, being prepared and things. But yeah, my as I say, my only part is maybe there's a more positive way of saying that directors are paid. The current compensation does recognize the amount of time spent at meetings. It's not an incentive for longer meetings. That's all.
I think Director Beamish was the last one on our speakers list. Oh, Director Seegers.
I was just trying to find this part. I remember reading it and then I couldn't find it. Let me just highlight it here first. Yeah, so I appreciate the work that you did outside of what you were looking or brought together to do. You were brought together to look at the compensation, but I was really interested in some of the other information that you came forward with. So on page 24, you go into conclusion and recommendations. But there's a lot in there, and I've got another one highlighted further on, but you're talking about the split between electoral area directors and municipal directors and what we should be involved in. And so on page 24 under G, number 1, it talks about service delivery collaboration rather than a separate, distinct role of the regional district alongside service delivery collaboration. So there's a whole conversation, I think, that underpins the recommendations for things like committee of the whole, an electoral area director committee, etc., and moving the business of the regional district forward. I don't know if we're necessarily ready to move there, but I know that it's been a conversation that we as directors have had. How do we become more effective and efficient at what we're doing, and how do we deal with the business of the regional district? So I can tell you, coming from the municipality, we spend way more time in meetings at the regional district, like way more time in meetings at the regional district than we do at a municipality. And so I was really, what you put in here was very good, very good. I really appreciate it because it was an outside look at what we do and how we do what we do. And I think there's a lot of stuff we can take away from there to change up what happens at the regional district. And it's a perfect time for us to do that as well right now, given there's some changes happening at the senior management level as well. So thank you for that work. I know it was outside the scope, but I really appreciate the information you put in there. There was another one that I highlighted here that talked about the similar thing. Let me see if I can find that quick.
I'll just respond quickly while you're looking. That's it's part and parcel when, especially when you have two experienced HR professionals view this from the outside and say, well, the very first thing, the biggest problem here is there's no roles and responsibilities. How you need to tie compensation to a job description, a policy, roles and responsibilities, as Amanda and Patricia both mentioned before. So then once you start talking about the roles and responsibilities, you get into all this other stuff. So it was really unavoidable to go down that path. So
yeah, and the other one then was on page 44, number 9. Where it talks about role clarity and the issues that the regional district has no legal function or responsibility for, and how we are actually delving into those roles in a way that we really have to revisit and look at again. So those are the two big components that I picked out of there. And so thank you for that work.
Thanks.
Any other questions for the committee before we thank them and release them? Any comments from the committee? Sorry. I also have Director Hiltz to put his hand up as well. But Patricia, if you want to go first, and then I'll go over to Director Hiltz.
No, I just really want to thank the directors for their thoughtful questions. It was really reaffirming for us that the work made sense, for one, and that you've read our report, which we know was a very lengthy tome. But your questions have caused us, I think we're deeply thinking about other issues as well that will keep our brains working. But it was an interesting project to work on, and we very much enjoyed it, and we thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Patricia. I'm going to go over to,
I'll just add to that if that's what you're looking at. Just quickly to say that we did have some discussions. Staff inquired with us too about, like, well, are we completely finished as a committee once this report is in? And we never reached a final decision on that. I think we're leaving ourselves open to the will of the board in terms of if you want us to. I mean, as far as, at least that was that was our feeling a month or two ago. I don't know if people's schedules have changed, but if you would like us to revisit anything or attend any other meetings where you consider consider these issues further, to be there as resources. I think that was our consensus when we discussed this. So just to let you know. Yeah.
Thank you, Silas. I have Directors Hiltz and Ties. Amanda, did you want to say anything first, or?
No, just to echo what Silas and Patricia have said. You've given us a lot of food for thought with your questions, and we really do appreciate the time and effort that you've put into reviewing the report. It's really clear that you've done that, and it makes us feel very valued. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It's certainly you. You certainly did a very deep dive into what we're doing here. So I'm going to go to Director Hiltz and then Director Ties, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, not on the compensation, but on those ancillary topics. And just we got the experts here. So the difference between a code of ethics and a code of conduct. The words in the report sometimes go back and forth, and the province talks about conduct and conflict of interest is ethics. So I'm just, what's your perspective on, are they the same or are they different?
The same. Just
ethics and conduct. Ethics and conduct.
Yeah, just different places tend to choose different words. Sometimes they're almost identical document, but sometimes ethics is used, sometimes conduct is used.
Director Ties?
Yeah, well, thank you once again. But I feel like there's a whole section on meeting, the recommendations around the meetings and the agendas that are published and all that kind of stuff that I feel like we haven't discussed yet. Now, am I remiss in process here, or is this something more that we discuss with staff, or how are we dealing with those things?
Well, that's a good question, Director Ties, because we do have the committee in front of us right now, and we have no further process defined as of yet. We do have the accompanying staff report. The board can certainly make more recommendations if we, or we can continue the conversation right now. I'm just going to recognize that we are almost an hour and a half into this meeting right now. And whether or not this is, we still have the staff report to review. We do have our experts, our committee right here in front of us as well. So, I mean, it's the will of the board, how you wish to proceed. So we can continue to ask, because I know there's still a lot of other things, and especially with the extensive dive, for the want of that, or for use of that word, that we've certainly received a very value add report. I'll say it's extensive. So I have a speakers list that's going up here. So I'll go to that and see where that ends us up. Director Toth, then McMahon, and then Seegers.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to chime in to suggest that perhaps we stick to any last questions for the committee, get those answered, thank them, let them go, and then we can, if we really want to get into the weeds on stuff, then we can do so then. But I think that I think it sounds like the majority of our questions have been answered that we had for the committee. So.
Yeah, and I would agree. If we can stick to technical questions around the report, maybe for, because I think there may be more opportunity to dive in with them a little bit more in the future. We'll go Director McMahon and then Director Seegers.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. Rarely have I seen such a field of tempting rabbit holes as is laid out before us here. And I spent some time yesterday, particularly going down many of them, kind of like Director Toth, but that exceeds, I think, our capabilities to deal with today, and I think we need to focus down. So thanks.
Yeah, and there's certainly some very big philosophical questions that need to be answered, and then the whole question around the like the how we want to look going forward, and this entire reflection on the governance process has been very interesting. Director Seegers, you're muted.
Usually I get it. I mean, I get where Director Ties is coming from. And whatever direction that we want to go as a board, I think we also have to recognize that this will have an impact on staff. And so we need to see, have the conversation, a joint conversation in what we'd like to see and how we'd like to see it happen and what the impact is on their side. Because inside of this report, there are things like, the order paper, what it looks like, how reports come to us, how information is presented to us, etc. All kinds of things that are far more reaching than just saying, we want this to happen. We have to look at how do we have it work for all of us, so that we are making the decisions that we need to make at the board level, but we have that separation between board and operations. I think what I'm reading in here is that sometimes we've gotten a little too far into the operations piece, and it's detrimental to staff, and it's causing us a lot of time in meetings and a lot of background work that maybe it's not our role. So that's the whole conversation to have. And how do we want that reflected going forward? So yes, we want to go there, not today.
Okay, thank you, Director Seegers. So any further questions for the committee? Any final comments for us? Just thank you so much for all the work. Thank you to Dean and to Tracy as well for the support. Dean's been giving me weekly or bi-weekly updates on where you've been at, and I know they both he and Tracy were very excited about the level of commitment the three of you had to the committee, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Okay, and thank you so much for your candor and being so open to the conversation, and I have a feeling that we'll be calling on you again.
We're local. You know where to find us.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. And I will release you into your day if that's okay with you. And thank you all for joining us today.
Enjoy the rest of your meeting.
Let's try and keep it under 3 hours. We're still on the old structure. Okay. Excellent. Okay. So with that, the next item up on our agenda is on our amended agenda, I should say, is the staff report, the accompanying staff report for this delegation, which is on pages 66A to F of our package. And I will pass it over to CAO McKinley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, essentially on this report, staff have sort of split it up into two sections. The first section on the remuneration portion of the recommendations from the committee, and the second section on some of the additional recommendations they had of the 7 recommendations that they had noted. And it's at your pleasure to decide how you would like to proceed. Thank you so much. And thank you to Tracy for all of her hard work in putting this report together.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go first I've got a bit of a speakers list happening. I've got Director McMahon and to Director Toth after that. So Director McMahon, start us off, please.
Yeah, when we first received the overall report and didn't yet have the staff report, I was trying to tease out which decisions we should be making now and which decisions, are going to require a lot more effort. And the staff report landed up almost exactly where I was, which means it's a good report, of course. but I am happy with the recommendations. A regular review of our remuneration is a dough. It should have been enacted years ago. I am fine with the limitation on conferences. Consumer price index, whatever. If it goes negative, I guess we get we lose money, but whatever. And I'm happy with the remuneration recommendation personally. So I can get behind all of that. The next whole bit, I almost feel like we should tackle separately. Like, let's start with the first, the first 4 recommendations to see if we're, on the same page with those, and then think about where we're moving forward with the rest of it. Just my suggestion.
Okay, thank you for that. I have Director Toth and Director Seegers.
Thank you, Chair. I do have one quick question for staff, and unfortunately I couldn't give it to them ahead of time because it was 2 o'clock in the morning. At the top of page 5, it's mentioned that a budget proposal may be necessary to support, excuse me, to support any changes to director remuneration. I couldn't find an actual budgeted amount for board wages for 2019 or 2020 anywhere. I'm just wondering if we have that number somewhere. And the follow-up to that is, of course, if that number, that base number, is greater than 305,000, are we not able to adopt the recommendations at any time throughout the year without a budgetary impact?
Okay, we'll go over to staff for consideration on that. CEO McKinley?
Yeah, I think, and I don't know if Tracy's able to jump in here if I get this wrong, but the idea is while the differences aren't large between what the costs were previously and what the cost might be moving forward, if the model is adopted, it would still be some minor change that may require a change in the budget.
Okay. Director Toth, does that answer your question? Not quite.
No, because obviously you don't know what remuneration is going to be during the year until after we've finished every meeting, and every meeting that runs over 3 hours, and every conference we attend and what have you. But I'm just, we had to have had some sort of pin placed within, our budget process or the financial plan to identify some sort of target threshold. And it's really that target that I'm wondering what it is.
I'm not sure if I understand the question fully. I know that when we look at the benchmark we use to compare what compensation might look like under this new model, we compared it to 2019. As 2020 we didn't think was a good example of what might be representative of meetings and travel, and also when the group started their work, it was September, so 2020 hadn't even ended yet. So if there was a benchmark or target, we were comparing it to 2019.
But Director Toth, are you asking what is the budget line item for governance, for directors governance?
2020. Let's go with 2020. Let's just pick one year.
Okay.
2020 to 2024 financial plan.
Yeah, CFO, please.
So to quickly, it's not, because we roll up our budget, we don't do line by line. Essentially for 2020, it was budgeted at 356. We did not amend that as part of the financial plan amendments. So that's through general government. There is a small amount through the rural areas, function 130, and that's to address some of those payments for attending conferences such as UBCM.
Okay. That's okay. That's the number that Director Toth was looking for. Okay, thank you, CFO. Okay, I have Director Seegers, then Director Lee.
Thank you. In addition to what Director Toth is saying, and then I'll get to my question, I guess where I'm going with this is, I mean, I didn't know what was going to come forward with this, and typically what we've done if there's been a big change is wait till closer to an election to actually incorporate it or make the changes. I don't see, personally, I don't know about anybody else, but personally, I don't see this as much of a change from what we've had in the past, except it would be way easier for staff. Like this would free up staff time immensely because they don't have to keep track of all the meetings and they don't have to, you know, all of that kind of stuff. So I would actually be in favor of recommending that, you know, where it says the implementation date, I would actually make it retroactive to January 1st, 2021. So that's where the piece around budget comes in, because where is that in the budget? We would have to potentially look at that. So that's just a follow-up to Director Toth. Couple questions. In the first recommendation, talks about defined roles in a reasonable degree of optional / additional activities. That's pretty vague in my world. I think we would need to ensure that it was identified in the roles and responsibilities so that we know that this is what you're expected to do as part of this. The third recommendation, the practice of paying for alternate directors to attend conferences be eliminated. I think that could be, we've already brought it up, could be revisited should, you know, the director themselves be incapacitated for some reason. We could make a change to that. So I'm okay with that piece. Other than that, I'm okay with the rest of these as written. And I'm okay with January 1st, 2021. I don't see it's much of a difference for us in my world, but you guys will have to weigh in on that piece.
Okay, I had Director Lee, but I noticed you put your hand down, but you've still got a spot on my speakers list if you'd like.
No, Director Sagers actually addressed the issue.
Okay, Director Hiltz, then Toth, then McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would say I am in support of the schedule, the first 4 recommendations, everything in general, even the January 1st makes sense to me. The simple model, it makes a whole bunch of sense. I do have a practical issue about the alternate directors, which I've, as we know, as rural directors, getting an alternate director has been a challenge for most people. So having some way to keep alternate directors interested. So whether there's discretion on a case-by-case basis to do this, which we usually have to do anyways, we have to make a motion to have a director, an alternate director attend on our behalf if scheduling conflicts or for whatever reason. So that's the only one I'm struggling with about is a tool that I have been using may be taken out of my quiver if I don't have a way to incentivize and bring up the skills of the alternate directors. That's you know, my only challenge.
Okay. As the entire concept of building the bench and the building the bench strength that you've spoken of so often. Okay, Director Toth and then Director McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not really sure how this fits in with the recommendations that are here, but I would welcome other dialogue with my fellow directors here. On page 25 in the agenda package, it says that the SCRD remuneration model includes an incentive to distribute compensation to multiple directors by assigning them to chair standing committees, even if they have limited experience with meetings or rules of order. Having committee chairs with limited experience can be stressful and onerous for those individuals as well as for the entire organization. To that, I challenge my directors. How else are you supposed to gain that experience if not by chairing committees? You know, there is additional work that the committee chairs do. We all know that. But one of the recommendations within here is actually that only the board chair should be chairing committees. And I don't think that's right for a host of reasons. You know, the chair still has a lot of work to do to represent the SCRD to media, outside interests, higher political offices. They still have to also represent their area. I think that work needs to stay distributed, not concentrated onto one individual.
And that's an interesting point, Director Toth. And I will say that in November of 2018 or December of 2018, I seem to remember one of our directors had his first time chairing ever. And and that was an experience by dumpster fire, I suppose I had, as what it was reflected back. But I personally, having been around an elected table for a number of years now, the more experience you can gain by being a committee chair, I think is the better. I think it's a less stressful environment. But I would challenge that when we have the board meeting, or when we were doing in-person board meetings, or we have the gallery full. It can be a stressful event. I think I get off pretty easy as the chairing of board meetings, which are typically very, very quiet and not typically very well attended. So, it's I still would just to continue to belabor the point is just I would fully support a shared distributed model amongst all directors, and keeping it as evenly spaced as possible to give everyone an opportunity who wants the opportunity. Not everyone wants that opportunity. So Director McMahon, Director Ties, and then Director Lee.
It's not very often I say this, but I agree with everything that the last four speakers have said. I would like to, I'd like to move us ahead to a more sensible, less staff-intensive system of remuneration. And I look forward to having a job description. This is actually something I identified when I came in, is that I don't have a job description. So I would like to get one fairly soon, but I realize that a lot of this other work around agendas and processes and codes of conduct and job descriptions and stuff, this may take a little time, but particularly when we've got a lot of other things going on as well. So I look forward to some staff suggestions about how we can space it out in a reasonable way. Q1 sounds like kind of fast to try and roll out new governance models, but again, that would be over to staff, I guess, for comments on that.
I don't know if the CEO wants to comment on that yet, or if we can continue through the directors, maybe. Okay, so I have Director Ties and then Director Lee.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in and say that generally I do like the recommendations, and I specifically like the recommendations around streamlining our committee and board meetings, as well as moving some items direct to board. I think that's just to expedite things and to make things more streamlined and efficient, I think. Yeah, overall I'm in favor, and it's hard to wrap your head around the whole thing, and I think it's sort of going to be a trial by error. So we're going to go and try this out, and then we'll probably refine processes as we go along. I don't think we're going to get it right off the get-go, but I think there's some potential for improvement, and I also look forward to shorter reports. That would be fantastic.
Director Lee.
Yes, thank you, Chair Pratt. Director Toth did prompt me to say that I do agree with his comments. I think it's extremely important to share the chair around as we're doing, especially for the people that are interested in doing it. And it's a valuable life lesson on having to do this. And I'm glad everybody steps up and does it. And I think it's the right thing to do. The second thing is I was a little hesitant in changing a compensation model in the middle of a term, where we normally would do it for the next people in. But listening to Director Seegers, I have to say that I agree with the reasoning, which I did earlier. We're not talking about more money. What we're talking about is just a different way of arriving at the same conclusion that's fair for everybody. And I see nothing wrong with that. And I think it would be brave of us to model it to see if it works. So I am okay with that as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Toth, I do have you, but I'm going to just interject with a couple of comments of my own. In regards to changing the model midterm, it's generally not advised by any governance recommendations it's typically it's done best in the last year of a term for the next board. However, with the compensation being so closely the same anyways, it's clear. I look at how we operate and how many things we are involved with and how many meetings we need to attend, and I've often heard the question from directors is, are we getting paid to attend this meeting? And because it is a consideration when we're having to give up paid work, and it just takes that question completely off the table. We're moving forward the business of the board, whether we're attending external committee meetings, whether we're attending workshops or other things. So I'm fully in favor of taking out the per meeting and the first number of recommendations that are there. Where I am hesitant on the staff recommendations of the report on page 66A, I'm fine with this going back to staff to look at, but rather than coming to a committee meeting, I think we need to have a less formal conversation about this as a board when we're looking at our policy roles and responsibilities and looking at the new government's model, because we're looking at a very philosophical change, which is more along the lines of how when we were operating, looking at renewing our strategic plan and doing a strategic planning session. It's big philosophical changes that we're making. And I would prefer to maybe hash those out at a workshop instead of a committee, and have a work session that way. I mean, we can set something up virtually because it doesn't look like we're meeting in person anytime soon yet. But that would be my suggestion for an amendment to these recommendations when we finally get there. So I've got Director Toth and then Director Beamish and Director Seegers.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still really iffy on the idea of moving to the base rate for a host of reasons I've shared. Some I still haven't gotten a chance to share. I'm going to keep my comments short because I think at this point I'm the only one who feels that way. One thing I did want to do, though, specifically, because I don't think I can support recommendation 2 in this list at this time, I'd like to move recommendations 3, 6, and 7.
Okay, so I have Director Toth would like to move that we adopt recommendations 3, 6, and 7. Is there a seconder for that motion? I see a seconder, Director Seegers. Okay, so to the motion on the floor to adopt recommendations 3, 6, and 7 on page 66A. Is there a Director Beamish and Director Seegers? I have you on the separate list, so I've already got your names down. So if you'd like to speak to adopting 3, 6, and 7, Director Beamish, would you like to speak to that at this time or no?
No, I'm comfortable with recommendation 2, so that's what I was going to talk to. The other ones I'm comfortable with, so.
Okay, so Director McMahon on adopting 3, 6, and 7.
Not sure it's the most efficient way to go around it, since I support all the recommendations, but sure, I mean, I'm not against it, so okay. If we want to do this piecemeal, let's do it piecemeal.
I I think we're okay to do this piecemeal because I'm hearing some around the table, and that's okay. We can do this. Anybody else on 3, 6, and 7? Okay, I will call the question on adopting recommendations 3, 6, and 7. All those in favor? Those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Okay, so back to my speakers list. I have Director Beamish and then Director Seegers.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the remuneration, and I think that this is as good a time as any to do it at the beginning of this year. I don't think the public will see that it being anything other than it's within existing budget, traditional budget costs. I think it will be a significant savings of some time to staff to not have to worry about who was there and recording a whole bunch of stuff. They just have to pay a remuneration. And I think, when you ask a group to do it, they've done an excellent job. They went beyond their mandate. And I think that some of those areas we need to take more time to consider. But in terms of remuneration, if we're going to adopt a remuneration task force, and we've already adopted number 7, which means we're going to ask them to do it again in 2025. I think we need to just bite the bullet and say thank you. The recommendations, I have not heard anybody speaking specifically against the numbers or anything, and I'll move recommendation number 2, that the board adopt base rates for electrical area and municipal area directors that encompass overall compensation for mandatory activities associated with the defined roles and reasonable degree of optional additional activities that support that role. I think we need to be specific, though, and adopt them as and put the numbers in there, because I think that's part of the financial recommendation. We should actually have numbers in there as opposed to referencing a table somewhere in a report somewhere. Looking at the history of this, the specific numbers that have been recommended should be included in the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Director Beamish. Do I have a seconder for Director Beamish's endorsement of recommendation number 2? Okay, I see a seconder. So Director Beamish, what I'm understanding from your comments are that you would like to adopt the base rates as presented it within the report.
Well, as long as it says presented in the report and it's dated such and such, and so it's very clear that you go back to that particular table. It's right now it's not clear. There's no clear reference. It's a financial resolution, and it should be financial numbers. So those should be inserted in the resolution. That's all.
Okay. So I am on because I'm on the amended agenda. I'm not sure. So
page 18 in the original report. It's in the
beautiful
summary.
Thank you, Director Seegers. Director Seegers, I had you next on the speakers list. Would you like to go ahead?
Well, I was going to make that recommendation, but then add to it that the implementation date be set at January 1st, 2021.
I agree with that.
Just bear with me one moment. I have my corporate officer waving at me first.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small procedural matter in that any change to the remuneration structure will mean an amendment to the remuneration bylaw. And so it cannot take effect before that bylaw is adopted. We cannot make the provisions retroactive.
Can be retroactive, yeah.
Okay, so can we deal with the date at the very end of this first part of recommendations then? Because we've already passed the first past 3 of them. We've passed 3, 6, and 7. We're on number 2 right now. And at the bottom of this is that an implementation date be discussed. So we will deal with the implementation date after we deal with number 2. Is everyone clear on that? Okay. Okay, so Director Seegers, anything else on that?
Nope, well, you can come back to me and we'll take care of the other piece after that.
Okay, so the base rate, sorry, that was page 18 of the report or page 18 of the agenda? Page 18 of the agenda. 18 of the agenda. Thank you, Director Seegers. Okay, so to Director Beamish's point, what that would be is an electoral area director annual stipend of $33,363, Municipal Director, 23,354. The Chair Supplement, 23,354. Vice Chair Supplement, 3,003. Alternate Director at 1,600 with a per meeting day rate of $2.55.
Per day rate.
Per meeting day, yeah, per day rate. That's a day rate.
That's right, day rate, yeah. So half day would be half that.
Yes. Okay, is everyone clear on that? Are there any other comments on this recommendation? Is everyone clear on what we're voting on? Okay, I am going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Director Toth, would you like that recorded? Okay. Director Toth was the only one I saw that was opposed. Is that correct? Okay. Next up, I have Director Seegers to discuss implementation date.
Thank you. So our corporate officer can correct me on this, but it sounds like we need a motion, something like we request that staff bring forward a revised compensation policy reflecting a start date of this new schedule or whatever as of January 1st, 2021.
It would be a it's a bylaw.
Is it a bylaw?
It is a bylaw. Correct, corporate officer?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the director's remuneration bylaw would need to be amended because we do have, currently we have a schedule in there that has already been signed off on for 2021. So we would have to replace that schedule. And then per some of these recommendations, there are likely other amendments that would need to be made. Specifically, I'm thinking around the alternate directors attending conferences. So I would have to bring forward an amended bylaw for readings. And then once it's adopted, we could implement the change effective immediately.
Okay, so a question then to the corporate officer. So effective immediately, can we make that retroactive in that?
No, we cannot make it retroactive.
Compensation can be retroactive, I believe.
I'm sorry.
Director Beamish's question was, can compensation be retroactive? A corporate officer, I believe, had just answered that and said that no, it can't be because it's within a bylaw. It's different than if it's for an employee. Correct. Because they're not subject to a bylaw. The bylaw has a different legislative lens on it.
So the rates,
is that
correct? The rates are established within the remuneration bylaw and published as such. So it's not like a wage or a salary is my understanding, but maybe the CFO can add to that. But as far as I understand, we cannot make those rates retroactive, and they would only take effect once the bylaw was adopted.
CFO, any comments?
Just to say that, yes, that is correct. It's just like our user fees. So we can't retroactively charge things. So we can't backdate. It's the effective date of the bylaw.
Okay, so the recommendation then is that staff bring back a revised bylaw incorporating the changes that have been brought forward regarding compensation at this meeting.
That would work, or also we could just set an implementation.
Yeah, whatever wording you want. I'm just throwing something out.
I will make the appropriate bylaw amendments according to what's adopted. So if the timeline is to take effect in Q2, I will just ensure that I would have a bylaw brought forward by that time.
Does that timing work for you, given your workload?
Yes.
Okay, Q2. So effective, so aiming to have the changes take effect Q2 2021.
Okay. Director Toth.
You need a seconder first, then I'll speak.
I'm the chair, I don't. But I will take the seconder with Donna McMahon. And then I will let you speak, Director Toth.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification from staff on the retroactive pay thing. I'd actually had my hand up to point out that for 3 of the 4 municipal directors, this is actually going to be a pay cut. So depending on when in the year this would have taken effect, you could have actually had ended up with a negative paycheck if it had been retroactive. So I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Thank you, Director Toth. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor to take effect for Q2, for a bylaw to come back to take effect for Q2. Director McMahon.
Yeah, is the recording secretary happy with our wording to date?
Jennifer?
It was a little muddled, but I've got it. Thank you.
Okay. Whatever.
Sorry about that.
It's okay. Sherry's got it as well. So how about all the directors who are the ones that are voting on this? Is everyone clear? Okay. Terrific. Okay, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Those opposed? Okay, Director Toth, would you like that registered? Okay, Director Toth is opposed. We do have one more section with this, and I'm hoping that we can deal with this a little bit more quickly. Otherwise, we'll look to maybe having a quick break first and then deal with this. But I'd like to get this all done and then have a quick break and then on with the rest of our meeting. Director Toth?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that the proposed roles and responsibilities, board governance, and constituency allowance recommendations 1, 4, and 5, be forwarded to staff for further review and discussion at a future workshop as follows. Those numbers, and then the final recommendation that the Director Remuneration Review Task Force members be thanked for their contributions.
Okay. And I see that seconded by Director McMahon. And I'm going to look to staff because we did change that a little bit based on the staff report. CAO, is that workable?
That should be just fine. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Director Toth, I see your hand up again.
Real quick, this is one section I can 100% throw myself behind. It's about time we had job descriptions for what we're doing here.
Terrific. Yeah, I think we all agree on that very much, that it's difficult to lead when you have no roadmap. So it's be happy to have that. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Those opposed, I saw everybody unanimous assent there, so that's fantastic. That goes further. Is there anything further that staff would like to flag for this, or we good to have a 5 or a 10-minute break? What is 10? Okay, I'm seeing 10. Okay. And just once again, thank you to the committee, but especially thank you to Tracy and Dean, because these have been weekly meetings that they've been attending and helping to facilitate. And so Tracy and our CAO have been doing a lot of work in the background, as well as I know that our finance department has been very supportive, as well as our corporate officer as well. So thank you all for your work on that. I will see you back here at 4:15. Okay, 4:15. Thank you and welcome back to your regularly scheduled Sunshine Coast Regional District Board meeting of January 14th, 2021. We will now continue with reports. So directors, we have received all of these reports. So we'll go through them block by block to see if there's any of the recommendations you would like to pull out from any of our committee meetings. Starting with number 5 on Annex D, pages 67 to 68 of our package. And this is the Special Corporate and Administrative Services Committee recommendations, numbers 1 through 4 of December 3rd, 2020. Directors, did you want to pull out any from the block before we adopt these as a whole? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to adopt the recommendations for the Special Corporate and Administrative Services Committee of December 3rd, 2020. So moved Director Toth, seconded Director Beamish. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Though none opposed, the motion carries. Next up is Annex E, pages 69 to 74 of our package, number 6, the Planning and Community Development Committee recommendations, numbers 1, 2, 7 to 9, 11 to 18 of December 10th, 2020. Directors, would you like to pull out any of these recommendations before we adopt the block as a whole? Director McMahon?
I just had a follow-up question as to whether we have any new information on the new Brighton dock.
Okay, so just a question. Did you want to pull out you're just looking for more information, just a quick update? Directors, did you have any of these recommendations you wanted to pull out? Okay, so before we move the block as a whole, GM Hall, did you have anything you'd like to comment on the new Brighton dock, or is there an update for us, or would you like to get back to us at a future opportunity?
Thank you, Chair. Staff are analyzing the information that was provided at the delegation in December, and in anticipation of this recommendation being passed, we're preparing a staff report. We'll aim to bring that as soon as we can to an upcoming committee. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, GM Hall. Director McMahon, does that answer your question? Perfect, I see 2 thumbs up. That's fantastic. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone jumping up to pull out any of the recommendations to discuss separately, so I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the block as a whole. I see that moved by Director McMahon and seconded by Director Beamish. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Those opposed? Seeing none, we will move on to Annex F, pages 75 to 77 of our package, number 7 on your agenda. And this is the Infrastructure Services Committee recommendations, numbers 1 through 10 of December 17th, 2020. Directors, would you like to pull out any of these recommendations to debate separately? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the block as a whole. So moved Director McMahon, seconded Director Seegers. Any further discussion on these items? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. None opposed? The motion carries. Next up is Annex G of our package, the 2021 resolutions to the Association of Vancouver Island and Coastal Communities. And this starts on page 78 of our package. And I'm going to pass it over to our corporate officer, please.
Hello, Chair. Just to say that the call for resolutions has been released, and the deadline for submissions is February 26th, which means final resolutions would need to be adopted by the February 25th board meeting. If the board wishes to identify topics, we can bring them forward to the February 11th, actually, Infrastructure Services Committee in order to make the deadline.
Okay. Thank you, Corporate Officer. I see Director Ties.
Yeah, just a question. We're going to be discussing a motion later on this meeting about that's going to the federal government, wondering if there's any point in trying to move this to the AVICC and UBCM channels as well, or if this is an FCM thing.
Okay. Corporate officer, any thoughts on that before I move through the speakers list? Or I have.
I'll address that.
Okay, Director Speakers.
We actually had it on the UBCM agenda, like as a resolution at the last meeting. We put that forward, right? So it's already been through that process. So I don't know if we want to put that forward. I think we're looking at another avenue at this point.
Yeah. I think we're looking FCM for this one. Yeah. Okay. Any other topics that we'd like to bring forward to AVICC? And we have it on authority that the AGM will be AVICC AGM will be May 28th. Just waiting for public confirmation. So it's tentatively set, but we'll find out more. So Director McMahon.
Sorry, I may have not, it may be in the report and I missed it, but what happened to the conference? It was on again, then it was off, and then it was going to be moved, and then is AVICC happening? Well, we can get back to that at another meeting. I may propose a motion to do with Modi, but not ready yet, not today.
Now's the time because we don't have a lot of turnaround time for because our corporate officer has said that this will be coming back to a February infrastructure for more discussion. Corporate officer, if you can provide some clarity on timeline.
Yes, that's correct, but there's also an opportunity to submit directly to UBCM. So what they're saying at AVICC this year is that they're not sure whether they will take off the floor resolutions or late resolutions at the convention, and we may have to submit them directly to UBCM, anything that comes up after the deadline date of February 26th.
Okay. Director Beamish? You unmuted yourself. Did you have something to say?
Just for information, we're going to be talking about a resolution next week at our council relative to rat poison. And it actually mirrors a resolution that West Vancouver had requesting the province ban the rat poisons as the impact they have on the biodiversity issues. So we'll be discussing that, and if that comes forward, I'll be asking it also go forward to AVICC. West Vancouver, I think, was doing it, but they're not part of the Vancouver Islands, so I thought I would take it further.
Okay. Anything else from us? Because right now we're Director McMahon has one for Modi, but she's not quite ready. Director Ties has suggested cannabis, but we're thinking that might be a better spot at FCM. Do we have anything we want to bring forward to AVICC AGM this year? Staff have any suggestions on anything on your dockets that you'd like your elected to advocate for? But we wrote so many motions last year. We're going to call it we'll call it good this year. Okay. All right. So corporate officer at this time, it looks like we don't have anything to bring forward for motion topics. So if we don't bring forward any motions, we can't win the award for the best motion.
Or the most.
Or the most. That's okay. We can share with someone else. So Going once, going twice. Okay, well, see, there's something that we've taken off of staff's plate to do. So, okay, excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. There's nothing else then to do with that. Unless there's something, corporate officer, if you can clarify then, if the board has, if something comes up over the next couple of weeks prior to then, do we have any other opportunities to bring something forward? I guess.
So as long as the resolution was drafted and adopted at the the February board meeting, we could make the February 26th deadline. Other than
Okay.
that, anything that comes after that would likely be going directly to UBCM. And their deadline is June 30th.
The deadline again, sorry, corporate officer?
For UBCM is June 30th.
Perfect. Okay. All right, moving forward then, the next thing we have is a motion. We don't have any communications today, but we have motion. Number 9 here. We were provided this notice of motion at our last meeting and from Director Ties. So Director Ties, I'm going to put the floor over to you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to pull it up, but essentially, I've done a fair amount of research now, trying to get smart to this, because it's not an easy thing. There are several ways to get a license to produce marijuana, and one of them is to cultivate marijuana for medical purposes, so that you can make it for your own consumption when you have a prescription for it, and so, you know, it's called the right to access or something similar, and you can make it marijuana for yourself, or at most one other person that also has a prescription, and that is governed by the federal government through their Ministry of Health. And this is what most of the grow ops that are legal here on the Sunshine Coast have as their piece of paper that permits them to do what they're doing. And yet neither the RCMP nor we as a local government have the ability to either verify that they're only growing the number of plants that they're allowed to grow, that they're reselling it, that they're using local building codes as well as ventilation requirements, electrical, safe electrical. What am I trying to say? The safe electrical requirements, as well as plumbing, HVAC, all that kind of stuff, and that and we have really no way of addressing any of it because they have that permit. And so, knowing full well that I might be stepping into a hornet's nest here, because it is a large part of our unofficial economy here on the Sunshine Coast, I do think, for the sake of human safety, the safety of our firefighters, and the safety of our RCMP officers, as well as the fact that these people are essentially running underground businesses and within our neighborhoods, while affecting the neighborhood with the smells and such things. I think this does need to be addressed. I don't think we should basically prohibit it, but what we should do is make sure that whatever is permitted by the federal government is actually being adhered to, and that it's done in a safe manner. And therefore, I've put this motion together, and I'll just put the last part of the motion in there. And there's, therefore be it resolved that the SCRD board write a letter to Member of Parliament Patrick Weiler and the Federal Minister of Health, Patty Hajdu, that local governments and the RCMP be given the ability and authority to adequately enforce and control cannabis cultivation for medical purposes. And I thought that on top of that, we should probably add that maybe and that the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, that we should forward it to them as well as a motion. And then also maybe that the past UBCM motion on cannabis be referenced so that they know that it has also been voted on at the, or that at least UBCM has knowledge of it. I don't think, it wasn't the one that was pulled, I think, because somebody had some technical issue with it. So it ended up not being voted on, but UBCM did have some sort of comment on it at some point. So I'm not clear where that one stood in the end, but I think we should at least reference it.
Okay. I'm Director Seegers.
I think our corporate officer turned her microphone on.
Oh, corporate officer, go ahead.
Just to clarify, the UBCM motion was referred to the executive, and there was an amendment to the resolution that was proposed, and the board did receive that amendment and supported it. It essentially added First Nations governments to the resolution. And so my understanding is that it will go through the proper channel through UBCM in terms of their advocacy at the appropriate levels of government.
Thank you for that, corporate officer. Director Seegers, back to you.
Thank you. I think the quandary we're finding ourselves in is that it was because of the federal government looking to address growing of cannabis, marijuana, plants, whatever, by people in Canada. They wanted to start regulating it, and inside of that, they actually made it illegal for people to have plants, and some people need it for medicine. And so this was in my world, it was hastily put together and moved forward to give, in response to the Supreme Court of Canada, I believe, to give people who need marijuana access to it for medical purposes. I think what they came forward with was meant to be temporary and then been readjusted later down the road once the other regulations were brought in, the other laws, etc. But they've never gone back and readdressed it. And it has created an uneven playing field in the community. I was told recently by one of our bylaw officers, it was just before Christmas, that somebody locally applied for a medical license for personal use and was given approval to grow 500 plants. And their partner who lived with them also got a medical license and was also approved for 500 plants for personal use. So there's something not quite right inside of this. And because we have no oversight, we don't know, like you indicated, we don't know what our firefighters are going to move into or walk into when they deal with something. We don't know what the implications are. There are no checks and balances on things like odor control. So I think what we're looking to do is have the federal government come back and revisit this and bring it more in line with what its intent was when they looked to pass it. So I'm totally in favor of this. In fact, I think there's even more that we could do.
Okay. Thanks, Director Seegers. Over to Director Beamish, please.
I'm in favor of the resolution, and I commented to Director Ties that I thought there was maybe a word missing in the now therefore clause, and that is just before the word that local governments. It's either requesting that local governments or urging that local governments in the RCMP. Something needs to be, the action needs to be there. I thought that needs that word missing. The other thing I am somewhat concerned with is simply capacity. I mean, yeah, okay, we get that authority to do that. Does it come with any money? Do we have we're all looking for bylaw officers. The RCMP is already short of staff. So how can we also build capacity in the process to actually enforce a regulation if we were given the power to do that? And sometimes it is maybe in that I don't know if the applicants have to pay a fee, but perhaps that there should be some compensation come to municipalities for enforcement of this particular federal legislation. Because that's a missing part. We can ask for all the enforcement power we want, but can we actually do it? And I think that we should be also asking for that authority, the support. But I think it's a great resolution. We have to move it forward. We need to also be using more of our own powers. The power to deal with odor is something we need to take more action on and declare it a nuisance or deal with it in any way we can with neighbors and require remediation. So that's all I've said. But good resolution.
Thanks, Director Beamish. I'm going to go to Director Toth first, and then I'll come back to Director Seegers.
Unmute myself. I think that's the first time I've done that. Thank you, Chair. All I really wanted to chime into Director Beamish's comments was that, when you look at somebody who's wanting to set up to do this, if they need to do electrical permits or plumbing permits or electrical or plumbing or structural changes, they really do need to go through a permitting process. And perhaps there's opportunity within that permitting process to look at fees relating to cannabis cultivation, medicinal or otherwise. But without the ability to even attempt to enforce it in any manner, we could know that something's going on, but we have zero ability to do anything about it at this point.
Director Seegers.
Thank you. I think it even goes beyond that in that the people who get a license, we can't even get access to who has gotten a license. So we and the RCMP have no way to distinguish between the two. With regards to revenue, I know that there are calls for the provincial government, and this was a kind of a promise that was made to municipalities and to the provinces from the federal government that as revenue was going to be coming in, that revenue was going to be shared with the other levels of government. Haven't seen any of that come through. Maybe that's something to put on our radar as well for us to be able to have access to that revenue stream, to be able to do some of this enforcement and this, making sure that people are following our guidelines and our bylaws.
Director McMahon.
Yeah, I think everybody agrees this is a serious problem. I'm not sure that we have completely nailed down the solution. I wonder why we have two completely different cannabis sets of laws, which doesn't make any sense. I gotta wonder if they shouldn't simply repeal the medical marijuana provisions now that there are other provisions in place. Perhaps we need to take another kick at this. Not sure.
It's like nailing pot gummies to a wall. Sorry, rather than Jello. Maybe it's pot Jello. I don't know. Okay, so Director Ties, this is your motion. You've made a suggested change to it. We haven't actually officially moved this, but I'm hearing that you would like to add in the piece about the motion to be forwarded to FCM.
Yeah, and then I guess we need to add the request that Director Beamish has added, just to make it more grammatically sound.
Okay, corporate officer and recording secretary, do you have that? Yes, corporate officer.
Just to clarify, is in the final, therefore it be resolved clause request that local governments and the RCMP be given the ability and authority to adequately enforce and control cannabis cultivation for medical purposes.
And I think that's what, yeah. And then the additional piece was to be forwarded to FCM. Do we want to forward it as a motion to FCM AGM or just to the FCM Board of Directors, copy them on this? Director Ties, which would you prefer?
I'm not clear about how it works with FCM, and I'm wondering if we should also reference the UBCM motion, but I'll leave that up to staff as to how that's best done, I think.
Okay. Corporate Officer, any thoughts on that?
So for clarity, the action is that we write a letter and that this resolution be forwarded to FCM, or that we copy FCM on the letter. That's the clarity I would need.
Or do we want it to go to FCM AGM as a motion?
I thought FCM AGM as a motion, but that's sort of my thought.
Well, it's FCM as a AGM as a motion. Okay, so that's the change you'd like to, the two changes you'd like to make, to change the grammatical and add it in that it be sent to FCM AGM as a motion from the Sunshine Coast Regional District.
Sure.
Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Just one caveat. I'm just not 100% sure if this is the correct process to forward a resolution through to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. I know that UBCM often will do that. If we submit a resolution to UBCM and it addresses a federal matter, they will forward it on. But staff will look into that process, and whatever it is will ensure that it goes through that process to get to FCM as a motion, whether it's sent directly or through UBCM. Okay.
So we can leave that, we can add that second, that it be forwarded to FCM AGM, and then that's good. With the reference that Director Ties made to the UBCM resolution, I don't know if that's necessary to have in the actual motion or if it can just be in the additional language in there. It's Corporate Officer.
And that the motion adopted at UBCM also be forwarded?
Perfect. To FCM. Okay. Okay. So Director Ties, that's your motion with the amendments on the floor, or the changes on the, you've made that motion. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Director Seegers. Is there any further discussion to the motion on the floor, which is changed slightly from the one that's published in the package? Not seeing any, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of Director Ties' motion? Thank you. Those opposed? See none? Congratulations, Director Ties. It's a beautiful motion.
One of the few that didn't get overturned. Good.
Well, you had a lot of weeks to work on it, so there you go. Excellent. Okay, so we are going to move on next to bylaws, and man, I've missed bylaws. So we're going to start off with Annex H, pages 80 to 82 of our package. And this number 10 in the agenda is the Sunshine Coast Regional District Sanitary Landfill Site Amendment Bylaw number 405.23 2021. We are looking for first, second, and third reading. The voting is all directors, and it is a weighted vote. The weighted vote is listed there in your agenda. So I am going to look for a mover for first reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Sanitary Landfill Site Amendment Bylaw number 405.23 2021. So move Director Toth, seconded Director Hiltz. Thank you. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. And for second reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Sanitary Landfill and Site Amendment Bylaw number 405.23 2021. So move second reading, Director Seegers. Seconded Director McMahon. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. And for third reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Sanitary Landfill Site Amendment Bylaw number 405.23, 2021. So moved. Third reading. Director Toth, seconded Director McMahon. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Annex I of our package, page 83 to 85. This is number 11 in your agenda. We are looking for third reading and adoption, and the voting is all electoral area directors get 1 vote each. And this is for Egmont Pender Harbor Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 708.2, 2020. So moved. Third reading, electoral area directors only. May I have a mover? Move Director Lee, seconded Director McMahon. Electoral area directors, any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. And for adoption of Egmont Pender Harbor Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 708.2, 2020. So moved adoption. Electoral area directors, Director Lee is moved, seconded by Director Hiltz. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question. All those in favor of adoption, electoral area directors, thank you. Next up, we have Annex J, pages 86 to 89 of our package, number 12 in the agenda. And this is Sunshine Coast Regional District Electoral Area Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 337.122, 2020. Looking for third reading and adoption. And once again, electoral area directors only, 1 vote each. So moved. Third reading of Sunshine Coast Regional District Electoral Area A Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 337.122, 2020. So moved. Director Lee, seconded Director Ties. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. That was third reading. And for adoption of Sunshine Coast Regional District Electoral Area A Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 337.122, 2020. So moved adoption. Director Lee, seconded Director McMahon. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. So that takes us our bylaws. We now have director's reports, but before we go into director's reports, because it does look like we're not going to be done by the 5 p.m. I do need a resolution for us to go beyond the 3-hour time limit of a board meeting. So move Director Seeger, seconded Director Toth. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so director's reports. I'm going to look for volunteers for who wants to go first. Director Seegers.
All right. Lots of stuff happening, but to report, basically, District of Seashell is working on budget. We've had a couple of fairly lengthy workshops with our staff. Other than that, just day to day, week to week, it's almost like the break didn't happen. We're back in the saddle. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay. Thank you, Director Seegers. Next up, I actually, sticking with the District of Seashell, we have Director Toth.
Thank you, Chair. The only thing I want to add is that other than the couple of workshops, we actually haven't had any meetings. We meet next week for the first time for the new year. So all's quiet on the Western Front.
Great. Okay, Director McMahon. You're number 3 for your director's report, please.
Sure, I'm going to be quick too. I noticed that the Coast Reporter has announced that there will be a shelter in Gibsons. So congratulations, Gibsons, for putting that together. Sorry, I blew your horn for you, but I was just very pleased to see that happen, the cold weather shelter. And also thank you to Gibsons for inviting me along on a tour of Gospel Rock this week. And the pool is open. That's good. And at Scredo board meeting this week, really interesting discussion about their role, potential role in our regional growth strategy. So yeah, there was some interesting and meaty discussion there. So I think I'm just gonna cut it off right there.
Thanks, Director McMahon. Director Beamish, you've unmuted yourself, so you're next.
I have nothing to add to what Donna McMahon said. Thank you.
Look at us. Oh, sorry, you muted yourself while you were still speaking.
I said she covered it all for me.
Great. How efficient of Area E. Okay, next up, who next volunteer? Director Hiltz, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple items. Gibson's and District Public Library is doing a 3-month pilot for being a vendor for BC Transit bus passes and tickets, which I understand will help out the town of Gibson's Hall from not having to sell them or dealing with it. The library has also applied for a COVID restart funding for the washroom renovation. And again, the note of the quick turnaround, and it's a bit of a scramble to get it in by, I think, like January 25th or something like that. And tomorrow is the inaugural meeting of the Ocean Watch Action Committee via Zoom. It's starting tomorrow, so I'll be there and we'll be able to report back about this is the first meeting of the task force becoming an action committee and what all that means. We'll find out tomorrow. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Hiltz. Director Toth, did you forget something with your report?
Director Hiltz made me realize that I should have also mentioned that the Sechelt Public Library is also a transit ticket and pass vendor now. So that's good news in Sechelt, because I know that transit was sort of shopping around some options with the visitor center closed.
Yes, and I know our GM of infrastructure appreciates us mentioning that, because it's good to see us in other places. So yes, so there's other places that you can purchase transit tickets. Okay, so who would like to volunteer next for director's reports? Director Ties.
Yeah, I was trying to rack my brain as to, I thought there was something last week that I wanted to bring up in the director's report, but I can't remember it now. So I just want to say it's good to be back. It's nice having the kid back in school and be back in the routine. So this is more relaxing for me than the Christmas break. So thanks everyone for a good day, and may it end soon.
Director Paul, you unmuted, so you get to go next.
Yes, we're getting awfully close to finishing off our wastewater treatment plant upgrade on Sinku Drive. That is moving along nicely, and we'll have that hopefully completed by the end of the month. So that's moving along at pace. We're also looking at doing a study on the king tide erosion problem we're having in that same area, and also along Silcombe. So we'll be letting out a contract for that to bring somebody in and figure out how we're going to beat up on the water for eroding us. Other than that, it's a normal start to the year. Everybody's going crazy, and we're deep into budget. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Paul. Director Lee, it's you or me. Do we flip a coin? You know what? I'm chairing the meeting. You're next.
If I can find my button, I made it. Just one item I thought I would just mention. Because of the recent storms we had up here, there was 2 long-term derelict boats in Whiskey Slough. One of them sunk, and the other one was holding it up by the mooring lines. And they broke free and started to wander around in the bay, bouncing off boats and bouncing off docks. And so a local contractor, Garden Bay Marine, basically Bob and Dan Fielding, took and grabbed them. But then once you have them, what do you do with them? So they took the one and they pumped it out, but the hull was breached. So if you stop pumping, it sunk. So they put it up on the Garden Bay Marines Railway ways, and are making arrangements to tow it quite quickly over to pods and pull it up and crunch it. And Kerry Rand Contracting has in turn volunteered his machine to crunch it up. So this is all Good Samaritan, no cost. They just went and did it. The one that was floating, they secured it to a dock that they have so that it can be held until the official way of looking after it does occur, because they need to get requests for funding in to the government to actually pay for it. That one can wait until they can pay for it. So I thought that I'd mention Michael Jackson and Pods and the use of his launching ramp as well, because he donated that to the community cause as well. So if there ever was Good Samaritans that do good work for people, I think that's a fine example of it. So I wanted to just recognize the good work they did. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. That's it. Okay. Wow. So that leaves it at Area B, and myself was trying desperately to get caught up on email over Christmas, but spent a lot of time with my family as my youngest moved over to the East Coast for Coast Guard College. Yeah, just a lot of family time, because that's what you do during COVID and when you're not allowed to spend any time with anyone else. So pretty quiet, and otherwise I'm going to call that good for director's reports. And the next thing we have up is an item of new business being brought forward by Director McMahon. Director McMahon?
Sure. UBCM put a call out in, I think, November for volunteers, for volunteer elected people for the UBCM, for the Provincial Road Safety Strategy Committee. And I've put my name in, and in the very unlikely event that they should select me, I would need the board's approval. And basically, I said that I feel that rural areas are underrepresented in the road safety, and also that there's insufficient attention to other road users than vehicles. So I'm looking for the board's approval in case I accidentally get appointed.
Okay, so you are looking for a motion to approve a potential appointment to the Provincial Road Safety Committee. Is that okay? So I see that moved and seconded by multiple people. And I'm just, if we just congratulate you and cross our fingers on your potential appointment, and hopefully it won't take you away from us too much, but with that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Corporate officer, is that sufficient? I'm sorry, I should have asked that before but that's okay? Okay. She's nodding her head. She hasn't thrown anything at the screen yet, so we'll call that good. Terrific. Okay, so with that, that's it for our regular agenda. We do have to go in camera. And I know because we've just gone a little bit longer today, I know we're going to lose one or two directors as they have other commitments. For anybody within our audience, after I read the motion to go in camera, we will go to you for questions. So I'm going to ask for the motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with Section 91A(c) and 2B of the Community Charter. So moved and seconded. Thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. And with that, we'll go over to our audience, our list of attendees, our list of one. Oh, Rick. Wow. You are the steadfastness that you have put to your work. Do you have a question for us? Oh, there we go. Okay, go ahead, Rick.
No, I do not.
Oh.
Thank you for recognizing my steadfastness, but no, I don't have a question. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much for your commitment to staying online, Rick. We really do appreciate it. With that, I'm just going to give everybody just a couple of minutes. We'll come back at 5:05 for our closed session, just to give you a moment just to stretch your legs, secure your spaces, and then we'll come in at 5:05 with our in-camera session, please. Thank you. Thank you, and welcome back to the last section of the regular board meeting of the Sunshine Coast Regional District of January 14th, 2021. Pardon me, we have one last item of business to take care of before we adjourn. And this is a motion, and I'm going to ask Sherry to read the motion while I take a drink of water and cough.
That a letter of support be coordinated with the Sechelt Nation to support the engagement process. We'll put more detail around the actual process.
Actually, you refer to the subject line, the launch of the Sechelt BC land use planning engagement process.
Great, thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Director Zegers and Corporate Officer, for filling in as I cough and tear up. Okay, is that, would anybody like that reread? Okay, may I ask for a mover, please? So moved Director Zegers, seconded Director Toth, and multiple others. Is there any further discussion on this? I think the comment I really like to make is we'd like to support this process that is going forward between Sechelt Nation and BC land use planning, and make sure that we get a very full engagement out of this for regarding around this process. So with that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Okay, with that, that was our last item of business. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn, please. So moved and seconded. All those in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you so much for joining us all today and sticking with us to the very end. Any further questions? Anything that's come in? People are leaving. Bye.